So today we're going to talk about the first English colonies in America. Why were the British so late to colonize North America? Because they saw the New World as a base for piracy of the Spanish. In other words, they wanted to rob the Spanish of their gold, the galleons coming out of the Aztec Empire, which they did. So why the settlers came, you need to know the 3 G's and an S: God, gold, and spices. Wanted to spread Christianity, look for riches, and glory from the Renaissance, which enhances a name for yourself, make a name for yourself. So the impact on the Indians, real easy. Killed them. Disease kills them off and introduces them into slavery. What you might want to know, before 1607 or in 1607 when the English arrived here, the disease that they had gotten from Hernan Cortez's men in 1519 had wiped out 90% of all Native American population in North and South America. 90%. So clashes with the natives, of course, would be over land. Indians thought that we are part of the land and you can't own it, and of course Europeans felt like you can own land. For the English in particular, they didn't like to intermarry with Indians. They looked down on them, and we'll have a chart and goes through some of these differences. There are some exceptions, of course, with Pocahontas and stuff, but for the most part, no intermarriage with English, not Spanish. The Roanoke Colony is the first colony. It's a failed attempt, as you see, 1587. They tried to colonize what is present-day North Carolina, Edenton area, but the area is named Virginia at the time. Sir Walter Raleigh gets permission. He's given a charter by Queen Elizabeth I to colonize this area. So what happened to the lost colony? We don't know exactly. There's two different stories of what happened to them. And as you see in 1587, running low on supplies, they went back to resupply. John White went back to get resupplies from England, and there was a war going on. The Spanish Armada versus the English Navy. Remember, the English wins, but this holds them up for about 18 months getting back to the colony. So when they get back, they found the word Croatan written on a tree, and the fate of the colonists were unknown. One of your tribes here in North Carolina, the Lumbee Indians, trace their heritage back to this and say that they actually were created from this tribe. Part of them were created from this tribe, so or from this colony. So the Lumbees and Lumberton, North Carolina, Robeson County. Jamestown is the second colony. It's the first permanent colony in America. Jamestown was founded on the James River in present-day Virginia, founded by the London Joint Stock Company. It's formed to settle an area and make profits in a new world. They hope to make money off of gold and spices. Guys, not one person on here knew how to farm. They didn't know how to build. They were all miners. They were looking to dig for gold. So John Smith ends up being the leader of this colony. Take a wild guess. The first winter's not going to be good for them because nobody knew how to survive. And they didn't. Only about 20 out of 150 lived. Hard times, as you see, disease, starvation. Why? They're far from home, hard to resupply. They chose a swampy, unhealthy site. Lack of skills for settlement. Guys, like I said, they were all miners. John Smith's rule was very simple. You don't work, you don't eat. The Powhatan or Powhatan Indians helped the colonists, helped by providing them food. This was Pocahontas' tribe. So we have Jamestown in the first permanent colony. As you see, they established the first legislature in America, the House of Burgesses. You need to put a star by that. Began the beginning of self-government in the colonies. And as you see, it sets precedent for self-rule. Tobacco becomes a cash crop. It's called brown gold. John Rolfe creates what is called the Greater Strand that can work in the New World. He actually cross-seeded South American tobacco, which was very mild, with North American tobacco, which was very harsh for Europeans. And it is John Rolfe in, I believe, 1614, 1615 that marries Pocahontas, not John Smith. John Smith is actually injured in a hunting accident and had to go back to England, but it's John Rolfe that marries Pocahontas in a political marriage that kept the peace between the Powhatan and the colonists for 7 years until 1622. And they lived a happily, not happily ever after, but they did stay together. So it's John Rolfe that married Pocahontas. Jamestown's the first permanent colony. As you see, reliance for labor, or reliance on labor. Tobacco is an intensive crop. Manual labor is needed, and they used indentured servants from England. What would happen is these people in England would be too poor to be able to afford a ticket to board the boat to the New World. So a farmer or a plantation owner would pay for their ticket. Once they get over here, and of course they had to sign a contract, they were a indentured servant for 4 to 7 years to that person who bought their ticket. They had rights as English citizens. And once you get out of indentured servitude, it could be anywhere from 4 to 7 years. You are free to own your own property, work your own land. The unfortunate thing is about 80 to 85% of these indentured servants didn't make it 4 to 7 years. They were worked to death. But you don't put that on the poster when you're trying to get people over here. So the first slaves come to Virginia in 1619 aboard Dutch merchant ships to help try to fill some labor shortages. And as you see here, typically they have no rights under law. However, it just depends. The institution of slavery is not uniform in the early days. It's very informal until around the year 1661. But some places slaves did have rights under law, but some places they didn't in the early days. So clashes with Native Americans. As you see, in 1622, war breaks out again between the colonists and the Powhatan. Colonists never forgave the Powhatan for attacks during the time of starving. This would be a time period in the winter of 1608, 1609. And 600 colonists ventured over here. Europeans ventured over here, and only about 50 lived. So this was a great time of death, disease, starving, and the Powhatan attacked the colonists during this winter. At any rate, the war goes on for a couple of years, and by 1624, Virginia becomes a royal colony that the king could protect the settlers. So basically, it becomes a royal colony directly under the king's control, King James here, to be exact, 1 year before he dies. So Bacon's Rebellion. As you see, in 1675, you have a land dispute between natives and farmers. Virginia's Governor William Berkeley didn't send troops, so Nathaniel Bacon formed his own army to fight. Berkeley calls this army illegal, and so what this army wanted, they wanted more representation in the House of Burgesses because they had none. They wanted to gain support for the frontier farmer. Nathaniel Bacon led the frontier colonists in the rebellion against the Virginia government after they defeated the Indians. They turned and they marched on Jamestown. This is the first time Jamestown is marched on and burnt to the ground. The price of tobacco falls because of this. And you need to know, in September 1676 is when they marched on it. They burnt Jamestown down. Wealthy settlers fled by ship. They got out. And this revolt shows the power of the farmer and the indentured servant, because they both rose up against this government. And they didn't want to be taxed without representation. Their slogan was no taxation without representation. You don't need to remember that right now. But that slogan comes from Bacon's Rebellion. So Nope, I'll go back. Some effects of the rebellion. Here it is. Okay. If you read here, consent of the people, between the government and the people, rebellion would lead to an end to indentured servitude and a rise in slavery. Unified different races and economic groups. So taxes were reduced here, as you see. Free men were given back their rights. There's a more aggressive Indian policy. So there we go. So this chart you need to fill out. You need to know this chart. This kind of quickly goes through the different countries and how their patterns of settlement and how they got along with Indians. So if you look, it shows you here the French, and basically they had good relations with the Native Americans, but they're the only one of the big three that did. So just look over this, read this chart, know it, and we'll talk about it soon.